All right, good evening and welcome to the Arcadia Unified School District's Board of Education meeting. Today is September 28th and we will be calling to order at 7:05 p.m. And just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube and can be accessed at boardmeeting.ausd.net. And with that, let me do our roll call. Board members Yi, Eng, Kinsler, and Chang are all here, as well as myself, and our entire executive team is here. And that brings us to the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Kindler, since you have inspiration, would you lead us, please?
Yep. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Tonight on the agenda, on the consent agenda, I should say, is one little item that takes a lot of work. There are the school plans, or single plans for student achievement, and there's one for every single school in the district. It takes a wealth of people to put them together. It takes the principal leading all the school site teams to review, teachers, the data that they look at, parent and community input goes into each one. These are not little things. That, and we just had Friday was our PD day, the professional development day for our staff. And our community is always involved in that the kids have to stay home or be in childcare, and it changes the normal routine of day. And I think my point to this is that the professional development day and all the work that goes into those single plans for student achievement, it's all about, and our PD day covered, our Better Together data, how we work together, how we build community, build trust, and our relationships, and how important those are. And it really is important. I have a few quotes, and one is from, we have at all of our schools the Stephen Covey's program on values, and I thought one of his quotes might be nice. Trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communications. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships. But the other quotes that I always think of when I go back to school, and especially elementary kids, is Fred Rogers. It's not the honors and the prizes and the fancy outsides of life which ultimately nourish our souls. It's the knowing that we can be trusted, that we never have to fear the truth, that the bedrock of our very being is very good stuff. And the world needs a sense of worth, and it will achieve it only by its people feeling that they are worthwhile. Try your best to make goodness attractive. That's one of the toughest assignments you'll ever be given. That too is Fred Rogers. And the last one I have from Fred Rogers is, there are 3 ways to ultimate success. The first way is to be kind. The second way is to be kind. The third way is to be kind. And so I thank everybody who works together in our community, building our relationships and trust and working together for the best of our students. That's it.
Thank you so much. All right, may I have a motion to approve the agenda this evening?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Yee, seconded by Mrs. Kinsler. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We did have closed session this evening. However, no action was taken, so I have nothing to report out. It looks like we also have no audience comments for the evening. So that brings us to Miss Wu and our student representative report.
And it's homecoming week.
Woo!
Lot to talk about.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm Ava Wu, the student rep to the board, and with me is a member of ASB's Executive Council, and tonight we'll be reporting on various school and student affairs. So, to start off, to increase spirit and excitement for Homecoming 2021, ASB held the dance theme and venue reveal on September 7th during lunch in the Rally Court. ASB is currently hosting Homecoming Spirit Week and will hold the Homecoming Dance on October 2nd at the Peterson Automotive Museum from 7 to 11 p.m. with the theme Chasing Sunsets. On Friday, October 1st, ASB will be hosting a variety of activities for students. There will be an assembly in the morning to raise school spirit, a lunch activity, and a tailgate before the football game later in the day. The ASB Vice President has successfully finished fall elections, swearing in freshman council as well as the sophomore secretary into their respective positions. The homecoming royalty and newly elected ASB members were announced in a ceremony held during lunch in the Rally Court on September 23rd. Homecoming royalty will make their appearance during an all-school assembly and football game on October 1st. The Vice President is now working with Link Crew to finalize the last details for the tailgate, which will take place in the AHS Rally Court before the homecoming football game. So now going on to the historian report. Okay, so first off, we have, oh, my magic isn't working.
We have tech support on its way.
Okay.
Now it should go.
Great, exciting homecoming 2021 venue and theme reveal. So first off, Homecoming 2021's venue was revealed to be Peterson Automotive Museum on a poster made by ASB's Publicity Committee. Next, we have the Homecoming theme reveal to be Chasing Sunsets, also made by ASB's Publicity Committee. Oh, my magic seems to have died again. It won't click on. There we go. Okay, and then here's all of ASB posing with both posters. Next is Spirit Week advertisement photos. So Spirit Week is going on right now, and before that happens, ASB posed with our various outfits to show what students, give them an idea of how to dress up. So first off, we have ASB members wearing their favorite pajamas to promote Midnight Monday, which is on the left, and sunset colors for Tangy Tuesday, which is on the right. Yes, thank you for being on theme. Then next we have ASB members expressing their inner tourist for Waves Wednesday, which is on the left, and their 80s style for Throwback Thursday on the right. And then lastly, we have some ASB members wearing their favorite AHS School Spirit shirts for Spirit Friday. Now going on to the publicity report, which is something new that we put in this year, because we wanted to share this beautiful poster that our publicity commissioner made for homecoming. So along with this poster, we also advertised our Spirit Week poster to explain what this week will look like. And then lastly, something that has been posted on the Arcadia ASB Instagram account is these Get to Know Me templates, where we have the ASB member, their picture posted along with some information such as their grade, Instagram handle, favorite cereal, so on, to familiarize the student body with ASB members. And that is the end of the publicity and historian report. So I'll just go ahead and continue. So the EDI commissioner collaborated with junior council to ensure their first bonding event, Sweet Beginnings, was more inclusive of all students at Arcadia. One way they worked to achieve this was by visiting special education classrooms to advertise the event. Additionally, the EDI commissioner and EDI office team held their first EDI meeting on Tuesday. I'll now hand it over to my ASB executive member.
Good evening. My name is Joyce Lee, and I'm the Sophomore Council Vice President. The Link Crew leaders held their first lunch meetings on September 2nd with an attendance of 448 freshmen. At these meetings, Link Crew leaders facilitate conversations, carry out fun activities, and update the freshmen on upcoming school opportunities and events. Link Crew's next lunch meetings will be on October 7th. The Academics Commissioner has been overseeing recent academic tryouts, including but not limited to Ocean Sciences Bowl and History Bowl. On Saturday, September 18th, band, choir, orchestra, and color guard all came together to participate in the annual music walkathon. Additionally, orchestras had their first performance of the year at the Pigskin Rally held in the Rally Court on Thursday, September 23rd. Within the past 2 weeks, our sports teams have represented Arcadia High School strongly. Our football team is currently 3-1. Our girls volleyball team is 6-4. Our girls golf is 3-0. Our boys water polo is 6-6. Our girls tennis is 8-0, and our cross country team swept the Lancers invite, taking all top 3 individual spots in the race. Junior Council held their first bonding event of the year, Sweet Beginnings, for the class of 2023 on September 17th. Attendees enjoyed customizable chocolate pudding cups with a candy toppings bar and created friendship bracelets from pre-packaged bags. Sophomore Council is in the process of planning their first bonding event of the year, which will be a Halloween movie night. Sophomore Council has also successfully held their first prom committee meeting and are starting to brainstorm possible themes for the dance. Thank you.
And then lastly, once again, in the spirit of homecoming, I'd just like to quickly explain our Chasing Sunsets theme, because I know it can sound a little ambiguous or arbitrary without. We have beautiful colors, but what does our theme mean? So first, how the theme came about. So ASB meets in the summer to brainstorm our theme and to really do homecoming planning. So first off, of course, we consider the venue, which is Peterson Automotive Museum. So first thing that pops to mind, cars. But what do you do with that? So with a long session of brainstorming, we ultimately landed on Chasing Sunsets. And what that means to us is really going after the beautiful things in life. So living each day to the fullest, so you just don't want the day to end. And then personally, my interpretation of this, when I hear the theme Chasing Sunsets, I imagine a movie-like scene of me and my friends riding in a car on a highway downtown LA because 2 of us can drive, so I'm not in the driver's seat, but someone else is. And we're listening to our music, having the time of our lives, with golden rays of sun seeping through the windows, and the sky a beautiful wash of pink and orange hues. So to me, Chasing Sunsets is going after these type of experiences. And that's what we're hoping for the student body, to make memories that are infused with a sense of freedom, youth, and bliss. Thank you. That is the end of the ASB report.
Thanks so much, Ms. Wu. Thank you for being here.
I have one quick question. When exactly is the football game?
The football game is this Friday at 7 p.m.
Friday, 7 p.m. Okay, thank you.
I'm glad she shared that. That was nice.
It was nice. Great, thank you. And that brings us to our action item portion of the agenda. And we'll be talking about our architect agreement. And Mr. Ellison.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to go out on a limb here because I'm so excited about this approval of this agreement. And since it is homecoming and Spirit Week, I'm going to say I'm as excited about this agreement as a sophomore hoping to get invited to homecoming.
We understand that.
All right, thank you. Wasn't sure of that one. All right. But I'm very excited about having this agreement come forward to the board for approval because it really marks the beginning of, what we're calling the phase 3 of our bond projects. And this is where Tony and I get to sort of start to make our mark on the district with our facilities. So this process of selecting an architect firm started with us putting out a request for qualifications, an RFQ. And Jaime Morales, our purchasing manager, sort of headed up that process. We received 15 responses from different firms. Those initial submissions went through a paper screening process that Tony Barrios, our director of facilities, and Jaime Morales undertook. And that led us to bringing in 4 architecture firms for interviews. We did those interviews in person here in the building. We had 3 principals, one from each level, being a part of that interview panel. We also had our Chief of Technology, Scott Bramley, because we all decided was the most experienced person in facilities and architect meetings, given his experience and all the work in the past. And we're happy to have him. And then also myself and Tony and Jaime were a part of that committee. We had some great interviews. All the firms, were well qualified, really high quality firms, but the group definitely reached consensus on choosing the TBP architecture group. And I'll turn it over to Tony now to continue.
Thank you, Dirk. So as part of that pre-screening process where we narrowed it down to the 4 that we're going to interview, some of the criteria that we looked at obviously was cost. What was their percentage rate they were going to be charging us? Experience, how many years have they been doing what we needed to be done? The location, which is very key in terms of meetings, how long is it going to take for them to get here? The size of the firm, do we want them too big or too small? And then litigation, whether or not they have been in litigation. Some of the architecture firms sometimes end up in litigation through to various errors and omissions in the design process. So once we vetted it down to the 4 firms that we felt met this criteria, the top 4, we then went through the interview process. And part of the interview process was the things that we valued the most, the mission and their values. Do they align with ours? We also considered their experience, what type of experience they had in the past, the type of consultants they were going to be using, and the community outreach that they were going to be able to employ, which we felt was critical, as all construction activities at schools are critical when working at that site, that you make sure you include the community, you talk to the community, and you know how to bring them in and make sure that they feel part of the process. So as Kay Kinsler had mentioned earlier, trust. We operate at the speed of trust, essentially, is something else Covey has said. And I think that's extremely important, and that was part of the selection process. Which one of these firms were we going to trust? Who is it that we felt aligned better with our values? And essentially, it came down to TVP architecture. So also, I want to mention that in the past, I have worked with TVP architecture at a previous district, not to be mentioned. But it's part of that trust. I've had that relationship. I know that they can perform. I know that they're going to be a great architect and just a valuable asset to the entire district and help us move these projects moving forward. Some of the projects, just to mention a couple of them. First, we're going to start off with Holly Avenue and replacing the portables that are out there in the field. That's our first major project. District-wide, we're going to start working on shade structures, which we know we desperately need right now, especially with the COVID eating outside, and also it gets extremely sunny out here. So those are kind of the 2 major projects. We'll still talk about the further projects that we'll be bringing back to you guys later. But in the meantime, I would like to introduce TVP architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Good evening, Arcata Unified School District Board of Education. We're really excited to be here tonight. My name is Gary Moon, and we're the TVP architecture team. And I've been with TVP about 30 years. I'm the CEO and the senior designer, so I'd be the senior designer on all these projects.
Oops. I guess my metric one doesn't work.
Let's see.
No.
Yeah, it should be that one. Yeah. No? No, not that one. Well, I could
Also an interesting
yeah.
production, but not one you probably know too much about.
I think I'll, haven't been to a board meeting in a couple of years.
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Tony. We appreciate it. We are humbled to be here today. And my name is Chang with TPP Architecture. I have been with TPP for over 20 years now. I've managed projects from a couple $1,000s in construction costs to over $110 million. Currently, I'm working with some of your neighboring districts, including Alhambra Unified School District, Glendale Unified School District, as well as Hacienda La Puente Unified School District. My role for your district will be project manager, and as a project manager, my main responsibility is to make sure that the project is on schedule and within your budget, and I'll also be your main point of contact moving forward. So in addition to the TPP team, we
And Carolyn.
and obviously Carolyn can't make it here tonight, but she will be our project leader, working with DSA consultants to make sure that the documents are coordinated. So in addition to the TPP team, we have strategically selected the consulting firms for the success of your projects. Most of the consultants are actually very local. They can be come to the district within a couple minutes. That's the consultants on the left-hand side. And some of the consultants actually have worked with the district previously. So TPP Architecture has been around for almost 70 years now. We'll be celebrating it in about a couple of months. And we've worked with over 65 school districts, completed over 1,000 new construction projects, as well as over 800 major modernization projects.
And Tony asked us to share some of our successes or chasing sunsets at different districts. And the first being Irvine Unified School District, where they're our longest running plant. We've been there 42 years. We did elementary, middle, and high schools from the ground up, and we've done modernizations at each of those. And I think my sunset that I chased there was Northwood High School, where my children actually got to attend after I designed it. So that was really great. And then Glendale, we started working there about 10 years ago, and right out of the gate, they passed the bond. Right out of the gate, we did assessments for 12 schools, and they were vetted with the entire community. So we focused on each school, each site, working with the administrators, and then the community to go through a process of determining which projects would kind of rise to the fore to be the projects that we'd work on. And the one that we worked with Tony on especially was College View School, which was really a fascinating school because it supported kids that were from pre-K to 22 years old. It was a school for children with special needs, or severe special needs. And then in addition to that, it was also a middle college high school because of its proximity across the street from Glendale College. The other projects that kind of rose to the fore, especially because of funding, were ORG projects, overcrowded relief grant projects, which are essentially taking portables and replacing them with permanent facilities. And we did 3 elementary schools, and the thing that's notable there was the 3 elementary schools we did design through construction documents into DSA in 6 weeks. I'm not promising that because I don't want to ever repeat that, but that's what we did, and it was over Christmas, so we were really psyched about that. And to kind of bring it to the current, we're doing one more project like that's 2 stories, about the same size as Fremont. That is modular. It's modular instead of permanent construction.
So, like I said earlier, I was working with the Hacienda La Puente Unified School District. These are the 2 projects that we recently completed for them. On the left-hand side is Wilson High School Home Economics and Culinary Project. That's a CTE funded project, very ambitious schedule. I don't know if you can see, but on the bottom of the page, you have 2 before photographs, and then obviously the bigger ones are after the modernization. So the project on the right-hand side is a Willow Adult Center multi-purpose building. In addition to their creative design, the success of this project is really about making it happen for the superintendent. We were tasked to design through construction in 7 months to get it done. So that was quite a task to accomplish.
course, we didn't have to get through DSA, so that's one of the reasons why it was 7 months instead of more. But, and the next district was Alhambra Unified, so another one of your neighbors, where we're working on 3 modernization projects at elementary schools, one of which has an 85-year-old multi-purpose room, which we're converting and tearing down and building a new one, along with kitchen and music for elementary school. And then at Mark Keppel High School, it's a $35 million modernization of the high school. And then to augment their CTE program, we're building a auto technology facility. And then let's see if this works. So at Norwalk Lamarada,
Oops.
Okay.
It's a video.
Yeah, is there a way to play the video? Sorry.
Oh, there you
So,
go.
yeah, okay. So, at Norwalk Lamarada Unified School District, we're replacing at Lamarada High School, okay, sorry. Replacing all their playfields with artificial turf. And by playfields, I mean baseball, softball, soccer, and football. And then augmenting each of those fields with concessions, storage, and team rooms. So, all right, not working.
Well, the reason we wanted to show you this video was just to show you what kind of design process we'll be going through with the district, showing you the animation so that everyone, all the stakeholders truly understand the design concept, so you are getting exactly, what you anticipated to be in construction.
And so finally, or not finally, but almost finally, we want to talk about some of the things that we kind of hold dear as we're working with each of our clients. And the first one is innovation, keeping an eye on where education is going. So we attend a lot of conferences, tour a lot of facilities, and talk to a lot of people, obviously, to ensure that we're understanding where education is going. But we also know that probably the most important thing, especially in our sort of 70 years of working, is that flexibility is the key, because these facilities are going to last at least 50 years or longer, 85 years. And so really ensuring that we create the most flexible environment that's going to be supportive of your teachers and the way they want to teach, they want to deliver instruction to the students, is vital. And the other thing is looking at every single project and identifying all the different learning opportunities, because there are a lot of spaces on campuses that are just completely unused. So how can we think about turning those spaces, programming them, and then turning those into spaces that can support student success, both inside and outside. And then finally, I think our biggest success is that we understand how to work with different districts. Every district has different different working style. We want to really delve into, talk to you to figure out what your style is. And we're really adept at working with a lot of different constituencies so that we can create something that really fits your district, your culture, and allows and supports student success. And then finally, I think probably our biggest strength is the staff that we have. We've got a staff that's been around for quite a long time. I think, excuse me, the average is about 12 years per staff member, if you kind of average it all out. And this is only a number of the 35 that we have in our office. And I think the thing that's important is that we can bring our experience to bear so that you can all have options and make informed decisions. So with that, we wanted to thank you very much for allowing us to talk a little bit about how we would love to work with you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We need to have a motion to approve the master agreement with TBP Architecture Incorporated for architecture services for various construction projects.
I move to award the master agreement for architecture services district-wide to TBP.
You did it. I jinxed it.
Oh, now I'm messing it up.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Kinsler and seconded by Mr. Chung. Any more question or discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. Thank you for coming tonight to present, and we look forward to working with you and appreciate the focus on innovation and the values and the collaboration.
Thank you.
All right, resolution 1441. Dr. Harishu, do you want to speak to this?
Sure.
I'm looking at the wrong side.
That's okay. All right, well, this is an annual item that we bring to the board. And basically, Ed Code has some provisions that give the board authority to help us really manage our staff in relation to what they're teaching and making sure that we are credentially compliant during an audit. And this becomes especially important for districts of our size, and especially at the secondary level, like for middle schools, as we are shrinking, we have to do more with the staff that we have. So provisions like this allow us to continue to keep our existing staff and use these types of measures in order to assign them the appropriate subjects and whatnot. So with that said, this is a two-step process. Tonight we recommend the approval of this resolution 1441, and then of course once you approve the PAR, then these actions will make us compliant from a credentialing perspective. And so with that, we recommend approval.
Okay, so we're discussing Resolution 1441, the authorization to assign elementary and secondary teachers to teach subjects not listed on teaching credentials under board resolution during the 21-22 school year and during the 22 summer school. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 1441.
All right, thank you, Mr. Eng. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kinsler. Any questions or discussion for Dr. Rishu? I'll just ask, I mean, I think from the outside looking in, that sometimes this could be construed as we're gonna put a teacher who does not know how to teach math as a math teacher. Can you explain a little bit, maybe
Sure,
more
that's
specifically, what this means for us as a district?
Sure. So one of the provisions in here is really allowing teachers to teach an athletics period, right? And this is typically at the high school. And all of these have been doing this and are qualified to do so and very successful. The other provisions allow us to look at their courseworks related to their university courses. And if they have enough credits, then this authorizes them as being eligible to and qualified to teach those subject matters. So it's not like you can do this with any teacher in any scenario. It's very narrow in its scope, but we like to use them just to be efficient with our staff. So good question.
Thank you. Any other question? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Now we'll be discussing Resolution 1442 about the sufficiency of instructional materials. Dr. Forsey.
This is another annual event for the board where Ed Code requires a public hearing that you certify the sufficiency of of materials for each pupil, which I can certify that we have.
Okay, great. So that brings it to me, I believe. So we are talking about the sufficiency of instructional materials, and we'll be conducting a public hearing where the public may testify on the resolution. Sufficiency of instructional materials, and that means that they have adequate test books and instructional materials to complete homework and do their schoolwork. So with that, I inaugurate the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak to that? All right, hearing no comments, I close the public hearing. Keep that hammer. And I request that we get a motion on the floor for this.
I'll move to adopt resolution number 1442.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chung. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Shirley beat you to it. All right, so Mrs. Yee, thank you. Any question, discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Okay. And no items have been removed from the consent agenda. Our information items, our first, we'll be talking about the Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services Plan. And Dr. Forsey, that means you're up again.
All right. As the team comes up, really all I want to say is the collaboration that's been involved with special ed, regular ed, our community, our stakeholder group that I know you've been a part of that. And really just, I'm not going to steal any thunder because they have a lot of information to give you, but the highlight for me has been watching the seamless collaboration involved in this, which started again during the shutdown, which was one of the hardest of times to do anything when we were still figuring out our method, being able to do that then and then carry it through now as we've come back. So just very proud of the work that this group has done.
Well, good evening. It's really nice to be here with all of you tonight and present to you our progress and the plans we have made to address significant disproportionality in Arcadia. And tonight we will, and I know it's a really loaded title here, we will present to you the 2021 Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services Plan. And just so for the sake of all of the presenters, we'll just call it the CCSS Plan for tonight. And like you mentioned, Ms. Kinsler, thank you so much for the beautiful inspiration. It is a team effort, and so I'm here to introduce the team that really coordinated this and collaborated all year long and over the last year on this plan. Dr. Catherine Mahoney, Dr. Andrea Mendoza, and my partner in crime, Dr. Daniel Hacking. They're here tonight as fellow presenters, but I also want to make special note of our stakeholder committee because they were also a very important part of the process as they collaborated with us to give us input on not just this year's plan, but last year's plan either. So Ms. Lee Chavez was part of that as our board member, also included parents, administrators, teachers from across the district. So I do want to make special note and thank them also for part of this process. Oh, I'm going to use the clicker. So last year we presented to you our 2020 CCSS Plan. Later in the school year, as a result of our school closures and shutdown, the deadline for that plan was pushed back. So we presented to you our CCSS Plan to address the significant disproportionality for Hispanic students identified as having a specific learning disability. We were notified early in 2020 of that status, and then we were notified again this year in early 2021 that we also then fell into significant disproportionality or identified for that, for the identification of white students for other health impairment under that eligibility. So as a result, we are required to write another plan to address that significant disproportionality. So that plan really follows the same format as last year. We had to develop a leadership team, develop a plan, present and include stakeholders in that, and also set aside funding to address the disproportionality. And then also it's really important that we hold ourselves accountable and progress monitor as part of the plan as well. So tonight you'll see the plan that was developed in collaboration with our team and our stakeholders. But what you'll also see is an alignment in the two plans. We wanted to be sure that we were thoughtful about our resources and also aligning both plans to make sure that there's coherence in our initiatives. So tonight, although we will present to you a new plan, you will see that it is really in alignment with how we feel we need to meet the needs of all students through our initiatives, our existing initiatives as well.
Okay, so this is a data report that just one piece of a data report actually, that we received from the California Department of Education in relation to significant disproportionality. And just as a short kind of brief overview, significant disproportionality is identified when a district has one student group that is identified at a greater rate than other student groups, or more than the general education population for that specific student group. For example, we have a total Hispanic student population in Arcadia of about 16%, and Hispanic students comprise 24% of our special education enrollment. So that disconnect of what the general population percentage is versus the special education population. And on the flip side, our Asian student population is close to 65% of our total population and makes up 36% of our special education population. So we also look at underrepresentation or underidentification, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. But just to give you an example, the state uses something that you'll see on there, that risk ratio, and it tells you that the max number that they would find acceptable is a 3. So anything over a 3 is considered disproportionality. When you have a number over 3 for 3 consecutive years, a district moves into significant disproportionality. So you might see we have some other 3s or higher that we're monitoring, but they're not part of our significant disproportionality identification at this time. We first had Hispanic students who were identified as having a specific learning disability highlighted in this data report in 2016, and we began to implement practices and conversations to address it. At that time in 2016, we had 116 students in that group. So you'll notice on this slide, based on 2019-20 data, our efforts did decrease that number to 91, but still keeps us at the risk ratio that's higher than 3. Similarly, we entered significant disproportionality for a new group of students, as Dr. Aceves mentioned, our white students identified as having another health impairment with 23 students. Just over the number, really with that risk ratio, it may not even constitute an entire student, right? It's proportional, but the number is something that we just need to make sure we're aware of and monitoring and addressing. So this is our more recent data. We presented last year, and the plan that we developed last year was based on 2018-19 data. And our 2020 data report that you see here shows that we now have 87 students who are Hispanic who have a specific learning disability. So again, we're continuing to make progress, but the risk ratio is still higher than what is acceptable for the CDE and the federal limits that are put in place. And you'll notice that we have 19 white students identified as having another health impairment, and we are now below the risk ratio, but they haven't quite updated our SIGDA status, right? So our plan that we are writing will continue to address this, but we're hoping that the trend will continue where this group will drop out over time. These masks are hard to breathe in. Like, whoo! Okay. And then we will, of course, be closely monitoring this data as part of our 27-month plan and beyond that. We are making positive shifts through this work, as you'll see from the data. And while some of these numbers are small, as a team, we committed to the importance of educational equity for all students. So as part of our ongoing equity work with our coaches, our principals, and education services leaders, I have been looking at the work of Elena Aguilar, who articulates this really well for us. So she indicates educational equity is the idea that no predictability of success or failure should correlate with any social or cultural factor. That a student would be more or less likely to be identified as disabled due to their race, ethnicity, linguistic background, economic class, or any similar factor. So that's something that drives this work. Regardless of the size of the number, it's important that we address it. Okay. Whoops, I went out. Scott. Thank you. Okay, so here's the timeline. So as Dr. Aceves mentioned, last spring we were identified as continuing to be significantly disproportionate with our Hispanic students in the area of specific learning disability, in addition to having a new group added. We then gathered data. We worked with our technical advisors to look at and pull CalPADS data, get some reports and feedback that we then brought to our stakeholders in the stakeholder meeting so that we could discuss the root causes of our situation and collaboratively develop action steps to address it. And then we're presenting that plan to you tonight. That plan is due to the CDE on September 30th. And Dr. Hacking will next share more details of the process with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahoney. What do I do? There we go. So, As Dr. Aceves said earlier, we had a great team working on this. It's lovely to see Ms. Chavez, who was the school board representative, along with the leadership team you can see on the left there, and all of the wonderful people from the sites, including, got to give a shout out to the parents, Sarah Reeves, Lisa Huff, and Rocio Romero. I think we have a principal here, Patty Materas, right there. She's a part of this group, as well as our experts who were very impressed with the collaboration of the team and were able to add their expertise as we developed the plan. So we all got together. You saw the timeline on the 23rd of August, and it was virtual, which is sad, but we're really good at virtual now. We've been doing it a while. And we did one of these things called a Jamboard. It's a great way for everybody who's online to be able to add thoughts and comments. What we were trying to do is, you can see the root there on that. That was my creative addition to the slide, because we're looking for root causes for CSAS, and really great, robust discussion came from this. And each one of those little yellow, blue, or green sticky notes, which aren't really sticky because they're on a computer, but you get the idea. And we were looking at the cultural differences, early intervention strategies, behavioral supports to look for the root causes. And that was a really good activity that we did as a group. And then here are our root causes. As you can see, we first look at MTSS. Multi-tiered student support is MTSS, and that is the overall umbrella of how we address the learning needs of all students. But the committee found that there's an absence of understanding of MTSS systemically through the district, and we're working on this. This is ongoing. So we need to address academic, social, and behavioral interventions using the MTSS model, and have clear, consistent structures identifying the tiers. There's 3 tiers to the MTSS systems of support, and for monitoring student intervention and progress as needed in Arcadia Unified. So that's one side of it. The other part was cultural influences and socioeconomic backgrounds, and so the stakeholder group questioned how culture in Arcadia impacts decisions made in AUSD in the organization. So it's the inside culture, excuse me. And then there's also the stakeholder groups concluding that different cultural families from different cultures might be less willing to get involved in intervention, special education than other families from other cultures. So that was, we're looking at the root causes there. Great discussion. Now I turn it over to the excellent Dr. Mendoza. No, Dr. Aceves, the other excellent doctor.
Dr. Mendoza is really excellent. She'll be after me. So as a result of the root causes, we continue to look at the MTSS initiative. We know that this is really our pathway to ensuring that we are meeting the needs of all of our students. This is an initiative, like Daniel was saying, it absolutely is something we continue to work on and focus and grow in Arcadia, and something that is a long-term goal, and something we will continue to revisit and think about year after year after year. And one thing that I do want to make note of, and I should have said it earlier, is that although the CCSS Plan is it's a compliance document, it is something that we are required to do. We know that whenever we have the opportunity to look at how we can support all of our students better and to look at improving our practices to meet the needs of all of our students, then that is an opportunity for us. And so when we think about how we can do that, just like we presented in our board study session this summer, we really know that continuing to strengthen our practices through MTSS is really how we will do that, especially with our students that we are trying to target as a result of this new plan. And so I know this is familiar to you, and we presented this to you last year. And our goal, or our measurable objective, to develop and implement consistent, systematic academic interventions through a tiered response approach in all elementary schools, continues to be really how we feel we will meet that first root cause, is to continue to implement the actions that we set forth last year. But again, continuing to enhance that. So that action one, we will use our MTSS TOSA, continue to use Ms. Renee Costarella as a support to all of our school sites to deliver professional development, to support the data work behind the scenes, and to continue to just build the capacity around this initiative. We will again target her in this plan, in our new plan, to help support our students. Our second action was, again, to provide professional development. This is something that we continue to do. We have implemented an MTSS leadership team that meets monthly, that Dr. Forsey will talk about in a little while. We also have all of our school sites at the elementary level really devoting a lot of time to studying and learning and building capacity with their leadership teams and all of their teams to continue to understand that common purpose and that structure and the whole system of MTSS. The only addition that's slightly different to this plan is that we know we want to focus also more significantly on behavior support and positive behavior support and positive social emotional support, because we can see as we look at our data of students who are identified under other health impairment, often it's with a medical diagnosis of ADD or ADHD, which we can look carefully at how we also address behavior concerns and interventions in the classrooms. Our action 3 is clearly define each tier in a tiered systematic approach to behavior and social, emotional, and academic interventions. So continuing to develop that knowledge, how we address, how we provide good first teaching, and when we need additional support for students in tier 2 and tier 3 supports. Again, action clearly defining roles and responsibilities throughout Arcadia, what our roles are, what our responsibilities are as classroom teachers, administrators, support staff, providing parent education and communication about our intervention programs and what supports at home can be utilized, working with our data. Another important part of the work that we're doing this year is really collecting meaningful data, compiling it, and making sure it's in the hands of our teachers in a timely manner so that interventions and instruction can happen appropriately when needed with students. Action 7 is tier 2 and tier 3, looking at really quality materials, providing any professional development around additional intervention materials we may need to support academics, social, emotional, and behavior. Data teams. This is something we're really excited about in every school. In our elementary schools, our middle schools are really working to implement regular time for our teachers to get together with like colleagues and look at student data and collaborate with one another about how to address any needs that they see or that are revealed. Our 504 practices, knowing that many opportunities may present themselves for us to meet the needs of students who may qualify under OHI through the 504 process instead of qualifying for special education, but meeting their needs through a 504 plan. And just reviewing those practices with our staff. And working with our special education and our evaluation processes to ensure that we are providing them the support they need to make sure that our reports are as accurate and as high quality as possible. And last, just again to look at our professional development to support positive behavior and positive behaviors, instruction, support, and intervention when needed. That is an additional action this year. Now I will turn it over to the excellent Dr. Andrea Mendoza.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. So what we're going to talk about is the measurable objective number 2, which is really the cultural influence that we are continuing on from the first CCSS plan. And so our first action here, we're focusing in, or continuing to focus in on the role that socioeconomic status and cultural expectations play when parents are making decisions on intervention programs and special education. And then we want to really continue to build awareness on equitable practices, acknowledging our own implicit biases, and setting high expectations for all of our students. And so we will be doing this by first looking at a book study by Elena Aguilar. Dr. Mahoney quoted a citation from her book that is a really great book study that we're working with the coaches and with principals and kind of looking at how do we continue to coach our teachers and use transformational coaching to support instructional practices going on in the classroom. And so with action 2, we will continue to provide the parent education and communication to families about intervention programs and the options that they have when discussing different things that we can offer to kids as needed. So for action 3, this too is about parent education to families about positive behavior management in the home. Last year, our elementary counselors did an excellent job of providing so many opportunities for our families to learn how they can support students at home. And we are trying to continue that work this year by really engaging families with strategies to continue to support students in the household. And so for action 4, we are continuing our equity work through data. As Dr. Aceves mentioned, we do have Mrs. Renee Costarella, who has been doing a phenomenal job in working with the sites and really looking at how are we getting to know our students better? What are the demographics? How are we incorporating culturally relevant teaching strategies to create that sense of belonging for students? So we will continue to work in using data to really get to know our students to build that sense of belonging. And so it's really important that we continue to evaluate effectiveness and build sustainability. And so we will do this in multiple ways. We will continue to try to establish clear systems and procedures that really build capacity and transparency so that we can go through systems efficiently and effectively. We will continue to analyze our data to monitor our student progress. So far this year, our school sites have really done an excellent job at looking at the data that we have from last year and looking at the data that we're starting to collect this year. We will continue to develop and provide ongoing professional development for staff. Dr. Aceves referred to this as well. So as we continue to look at data, through those discussions, we're going to see and find out what are the needs, what is that PD that our teachers need to continue to support them in the classroom. And then how do we continue to communicate with our families? What are those different modes and avenues for us to be able to communicate effectively with our families? And so we will be evaluating that.
So part of this process also required us to work with our SELPA partner, and so we've provided a draft of the CCSS plan to them as well and gotten their feedback. They were really satisfied and commended us on the process we went through, the input from the stakeholder group. They were actually part of the stakeholder group, so they witnessed that in person as well. And then the plan that was drafted, they felt was very well designed. So we got positive feedback from them. And we've presented an overview of the CCSS plan and the process for you tonight. And though the CDE does not require board approval for this plan, we greatly appreciate your input. As has been mentioned, Mrs. Chavez was a key member of our stakeholder group, and it was important to us that we present it to the entire board. We will be asking for a board member's signature on the plan, which we plan to submit by September 30th to the CDE. And then we will receive approval of the plan from the CDE, though we don't have an exact timeline of when they'll get back to us. Last time, the timeline was a little different because of COVID and the distance learning, all that was going on. So it got pushed back to, I think we submitted it in December and January, and we heard back late January and February. It was about a 4 to 6 week period of time before we heard back from them. And then we'd like to say thank you to our committee members for their participation in this process. The thoughtful and important feedback we got from them was absolutely integral to the development of this plan and to what we see as being the success of it as we start to implement it. So we're happy to take any questions or comments.
I had a question. So thank you very much. I thought that this was a really comprehensive plan, and I really like seeing the component of the education part, I think, is so important, which is where my question is, in terms of just the education part and, you know, getting families to feel more comfortable with the services that are offered and to realize, you know, how thoughtful, you know, the plans are and to help their students. Are there sort of sessions and stuff where the parents who have utilized intervention services talk to the parents that possibly could utilize it, just so that they get a parent perspective and, you know, and making sure that they see it from a parent perspective? Sometimes I feel like that helps in getting them to see the value.
Yes, that's an excellent suggestion. We're still, I think, once we've come up with the broad action steps, but are waiting for the CDE to give final approval before we kind of really slate out exactly what it's going to look like. But I think that is an excellent thing that we would definitely incorporate into some of the existing kind of ideas that we already have drafted out about the specific meetings and the specific modes of communication. So I think that's one somebody will take note of.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Always nice to have parent to parent.
Also want to thank the team for their great work making lemons out of lemonade. I know we don't want this being identified as groups having a significant disproportionality, but you know, you're kind of turning it into a positive outcome or attempting to help the students who do need it. Question about the other health impairments. I think you mentioned ADD and ADHD. Is there anything else that's kind of categorized in that other health impairments?
It's a pretty broad category in the sense of it's literally any other health impairment that might impact educational access or learning. So it can be really broad. And so it's almost a whatever doesn't fit. If you don't find it in one of the other categories and it has a medical component or a health component, the student could fall into this category. So in addition to students with diagnoses of ADD, ADHD, they might actually have asthma, or they might have something that's very kind of a common medical piece. Some of our kids who have seizure disorders would be kiddos who might fall into this category. But it's not an exhaustive list. It's more of a health-related and doesn't fall into the other categories.
How does, for things like very specific medical diagnosis that really the district has very little to do with, how do we change that proportionality if it's really not us doing the identification?
So the biggest area, and I think that's one of the reasons we highlighted ADD and ADHD, there is a piece where we can qualify students or find them eligible in that area, and they don't have to have a doctor's note or a medical note that brings that, but rather it's through observation of how they're performing at school and if there's an attentional component to it. And so one is that brings in professional judgment. And so making sure that we're looking through a lens of, is this culturally related? Is this are there some other factors? Maybe it's linguistically related and it appears as it's an attentional issue or distractibility. So just making sure that we are being thoughtful and really trying the interventions and going through MTSS to rule out that the student doesn't respond to other things, but rather truly requires special education supports.
I see. And last question. You're kind of in the middle of the plan at this point in time. Have you come to any kind of, not conclusions, but leaning towards whether we are over-identifying students or under-identifying other groups of students potentially that may need supports, but they're not getting them?
Right, definitely through the data work that we did with our technical advisors, they shared with the stakeholder group that we identify fewer of our majority population, our Asian American students, than would be expected, given just statistical averages.
Yeah.
And so that is impactful when we look at the risk ratio, because it is that comparison as well to our majority population. And so it's something we have looked at is, if we are under-identifying, are we not serving students appropriately, right? Are there students falling through the cracks that we're not identifying? Our overall data looks really good in that regard, in that we have really high graduation rates for unidentified students. We have high individual test scores and high test scores overall for unidentified students. So we have looked at it, and we'll continue to look at it, because we don't want to, under-identifying students who need that support is also a concern to us, as much as over-identifying a student as well.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for your great work. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. We have it. I was just going to ask if we have more questions, so jump in.
The one action that, of course, I really liked was the action 6 of identifying or establishing a data collection system. Will that be a whole new system, or?
Dr. Data.
Yeah, we are looking into this current system that we have. We currently use Illuminate, and we're working with Mr. Bramley in kind of evaluating our systems, what's going to be most efficient, how do we access and pull our data, because it is pretty complicated, especially as we download it from our different systems where we're using or giving the kids assessments and things like that. So yeah, we are looking into different tools and what would work best in really supporting us and supporting the sites so that it's more easily retrievable.
Fabulous. Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Ms. Wu, I was just curious to what an intervention really would look like or mean, because I know it would vary based on the need of the student, and also like Action 5, like support at home, because I know you mentioned a 504 plan, and I'm familiar with that is, but in terms of just the word intervention, I was just kind of curious of what that may look like.
Do you want to speak to the whole intervention system? Or no? You're on. Yeah. Oh, great. Okay. So we have layers of intervention, I would say, at every level based on different needs. And as much as we want to target and or refine our definitions, we have so much available to students already that has been built in over the years. So all the way from the counselors who already are in and of themselves providing social emotional interventions. They use targeted curriculum like Second Step, into Lunch Bunch and some other research-based practices. We have our classroom teachers who do interventions embedded within their classroom instruction, which we call Tier 1 and Tier 2 often. And then we have our academic program coaches. We have other intervention teachers who are utilized at school sites who are doing more of a pull-out model, where they're working with small groups of students to address individual needs. We have our ELD specialists who also have their own lens on how to help dual language learners or second language learners who are mastering English in addition to their home languages. I'm probably leaving things out, but we have coaches. We have a large coaching program, and part of what they're doing is bringing in best practices and research-based, scientific-based strategies to embed within instruction to make sure that our students are getting high-quality instruction before we're looking at pulling them out or looking at other interventions for them.
I'll add, I think the things that a lot of people don't often see is sometimes it could be as simple as a student that struggles with time. You know, like just thinking under a timed test or a timed quiz, right? And it could be as simple as a teacher might modify how many questions a student is getting. Students may not even know that in a classroom, right? Because that would be done between the teacher and that student because that's on their 504 or their IEP, and they modify that. So it can be as simple as that to something that's a pull-out where a student's getting additional supports outside of the classroom, so.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify it a lot.
There's another component to that. About 4 years ago, they were noticing at the elementary level more and more kids coming in with extreme behaviors where they have to move the whole class outside of the classroom to calm down the child. So the district, as they want to do to address problems, hired behavior management personnel, and one person, Karina Herrera, who is on this committee as well, an expert school psychologist, and she works and observes and coaches teachers along with the behavior management experts who are in the classrooms working side by side with these kids, so they're not pulled out, they don't lose the instruction, and they're learning how to that's a excellent intervention strategy so that those kids can stay in the class, get the instruction, and the other kids also get the instruction. And it's been very successful so far, about 3 years of doing that.
Okay, thank you. I can tell you're very knowledgeable and passionate about your work, and it's really nice to know that there are people like you working like this. We're so excited.
It's so hard with this mask. I feel like I just ran a race.
Okay, all right. Does it conclude the questions? Thank you. It was super informative. You guys don't have to thank me. Every person that stands up, it's a great group of people and super interesting work. So it's happy to be a part of it.
And I just want to follow up with the intervention question. Our data from our interventions that we do with students is really positive. And so we're really down to the fine tuning of the students that maybe it's not reaching, but the data and our intervention program in place reaches and helps the vast majority of students who need help. So I wouldn't want anyone to think, oh, we're doing this intervention and it's not being successful. It is highly successful for the vast majority of students. And so now we're taking another layer down and reaching down and pulling another group of students up, but it is a very successful intervention program.
All right. Department updates. Dr. Van Osdal, is that where we are?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, I have just two items to share, and then I'll get to our different departments. The first one was I just wanted to share that in case people missed it, but Dr. Ferrer just recently penned kind of an open letter to the county, basically just acknowledging that we are in a very positive, meaning downward, I think it's positive, going down, trend on the COVID cases. And, just as acknowledging that hospitalizations, the case percentages, deaths, everything is trending down, and we're looking really good and going into what traditionally is flu season. So we really wanted to be at this place at this time. And she acknowledged that she believes that the majority of our success as a community in the county has to do with our schools and how our schools have been able to apply these layered approaches of safety in order to, almost minimize completely the transmission of COVID in our schools. And when we do have cases coming to school, because it's inevitable, we're in a pandemic, the ability to mitigate those cases so quickly through our tracing, tracking, and quarantining has been highly successful. So I wanted to share that and then echo those words for our community, specifically in Arcadia, because you've been doing just a fabulous job of following, first of all, the masking that we've been asking of people, and I'll continue to ask people to keep up the good work, stay vigilant. We believe it's working, and we believe that we're going to stay on top of this trend and continue to have it go down, even though we're entering the flu season. And with that, we're really hoping that we'll begin to see some restrictions easing up on the way we're managing schools and operating. So just want to acknowledge everyone's good work with that, but continue to encourage everyone to keep it up and don't let up now. So that's great news. Secondly, something that we have been advocating for as superintendents in LA County. We've been writing multiple letters and talking personally with Dr. Ferrer about the concept of the health department taking on the responsibility of a dashboard for the COVID cases. I personally will share that I believe it was a bad idea from the beginning that school districts were asked to have dashboards of what's going on. And let me clarify that, because I know that sounds bad to just say, but no other entity in our community is required to have a dashboard. Churches don't have to have a dashboard of, who in this, how many cases have we had, or a bowling alley, or, the mall's full of kids at the party places all weekend. No one's asked to do that except the schools. Now, I don't mind having that responsibility because I think we're often the community partners, right, in health and safety. The problem is it's very confusing to the community, to the public, who believes that when they see our dashboard that these are cases that have been transmitted at our schools. That was my theory. I've now validated it because I've been making personal phone calls to just many, many, many parents that are concerned when they see our dashboard and want to know, like, why is this school safer than this other school that only has 2 cases and this one has 5? And the belief really is that one school is safer than the other, when that is just not true. All of our schools are equally safe because the cases are not being transmitted at schools. It just means that a student happens to come to school with COVID, but our mitigation has been highly successful. So, under that, it's just been disappointing that there's been a lot of that confusion. And because of that, it's been a direct correlation that parents have kept their kids home from school because of that misunderstanding. That's the disappointment for me, that children are not in school learning. In fact, I will be at birthday parties on the weekend with parents in our school district that do not have their kids in school because of the belief that they're not safe. And yet they're at a birthday party with 100 kids over at the mall. And so that's a long way to just share that there's, it's been very upsetting, I think, for all of us in education that have been doing everything possible to keep our students and our community safe. And unfortunately, the information flow is confusing to a lot of people. So we'll continue to have our dashboard and do our part, but the county is coming on board with their own dashboard, and I just want to read some quick bullets about it. The first one says, the data will reflect information reported to the public health from TK to 12 schools on COVID-19 cases among students, teachers, and staff. Data may differ from information collected at the district or school level due to the reporting time period and quality control conducted by public health staff. They're going to update their site once a week on Wednesdays. Ours is live, ongoing. A school with one or more cases is not necessarily a school with ongoing transmission. Most identified cases are from community exposures unrelated to school, what I was just saying. Out of over 3,000 schools in LA County, only a small fraction have COVID-19 outbreaks. Those that do are assisted by public health to mitigate spread. Data are refreshed every Wednesday due to updates and reporting delays. Case counts may change in future reports. So this is exciting news. I believe this will be another place of information for our community that's wanting to see where we are as a community, look at other communities as well. So wanted to share that. That will be on the LA Health Department website. Actually, it's already live, but I think they'll be continuing to update that. So that's what I wanted to share. And with that, let's start with business services. Dirk Esslin.
Yes, thanks. I have updates for 2 departments. I'll start with nutrition services. Excuse me. And the first topic is the city styrofoam ban proposed ordinance. I had a conversation with the assistant city manager, Jason Kruckeberg, about this. And he actually just sent me an email today letting me know that the vote has been delayed. It's been pushed back because of the attendance by the city council. But in our phone conversation, he explained to me, or clarified for me, sort of the proposed timeline for the implementation of this. And we would have, I think at this point, at least a year and a half, if not almost 2 years, to push out the implementation of these changes. So that's good. It gives us time to plan. It gives us time to research and look at the alternatives. So that's something that we have time to look forward to and to take care of. Within the district and nutrition services, at the elementary school level, we've started, just this week, we've started using scanners rather than the pin pads for the students to enter their IDs. That was something that was piloted actually at Highland Oaks, and it seems to be working, and so we've rolled that out to all the elementaries. The purpose is to make the process more touchless. It's not going to save time. It actually may take a little bit longer, but it is a more touchless option, and so that's why we're rolling that out. We continue to suffer from food shortages. Our deliveries are missing a lot of the food that we order, and as a result, a lot of the food, or not a lot, a good amount of the food that's actually being served doesn't match what's on the calendars, the menus that are put out, and I know that causes some concern for some of our families. But our department is doing the best they can with what they're getting. And those shortages are being caused by a lack of drivers. And I think we're starting to hear about that in other industries as well. But it's really about having the staff to make those deliveries. Not that the food isn't there, it's just that logistics of routing that food is what we're suffering from. Just today I got an update from Kathleen that because of the shortages in the food that is, I guess, apparently statewide, the Department of Education has provided some waivers in how we serve our meals. You know, typically you have to do 4 different foods, and they've given us flexibility on how we serve those meals. Just acknowledging the reality that every district is suffering from this problem. In terms of meal counts, we're at about almost 4,200 meals a day. 1,100 of those are breakfast, and so those meal counts are growing. You know, so I think that's a tribute to our nutrition service staff, that as students are eating the meals, they're coming back, and more are coming into the cafeterias to try out those meals. Moving on to purchasing and risk management. I know you'll probably hear a lot more later about what we're doing around COVID, but this one little piece of what we're doing in purchasing is we're going to be amending our contracts to include language requiring our vendors, our contractors, to acknowledge that they are complying with health guidelines, be that county or state guidelines. And we're doing this now because of the requirement to where people are either showing vaccination status or testing weekly. And so we're asking them to agree to that within our contracts. And then lastly, excuse me, Jaime Morales and I, who is also our risk manager, have been attending our traffic meetings with the city staff. This is something that we didn't do last year because nobody was on campus, but we're back at it. And we have the city traffic engineer, we have the police department attend, the principals, and sometimes the PTSA leadership. So far, things look really good. You know, this is a long, multi-year process that we've been having these meetings and making small improvements, and but for the most part, things look very good. They look very safe. And as small adjustments come up, we continue to work on those to try and make our students as safe as possible. Thank you.
I have a quick question, just to clarify. When you say we're having food shortages, that means what our nutrition services might have planned for taco day, but we didn't get every ingredient for tacos, but we might have gotten something else, so they switch it up and serve a different item. It doesn't mean it's so short, we're not serving food.
Yes, thank you for asking. Let me be very clear. We continue to have more than enough food, more than enough meals for every student that wants one. What, like, using your example, yes, you know, on Taco Tuesday, we may not have all the toppings present, and maybe it's only a portion of the toppings. Or instead of Taco Tuesday, we've switched to, I can't think of another word that starts with T.
Right.
Sort of Taco Tuesday. We may serve lasagna. It may be a completely
It might be something
different
else,
meal.
but they're getting
Yeah.
food. It just may not match up to what the plan
Yeah.
was.
The other thing that I've heard happen is that, you know, normally we offer 3 meal choices. And we may only be able to offer 2 choices one day because that particular option is just not available, or that one option runs out at one of our campuses by the end of lunch, but there are still the other 2 options available. And so, yeah, it's what we've ordered based on our menu planning that isn't showing up. And they're delivering other things, or we're scrambling and acquiring other things to create completely different meal options. The other thing that Kathleen told me just today is that the state has also relaxed the procurement requirements. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, we were talking about, made in USA requirement. That's all been relaxed. We're at the point now where we could, go to the local grocery store and buy food if we needed to, as a last resort. But yes, there continues to be sufficient meals for every student that wants one.
Thank you.
And when you say a more touchless system of scanning, does each child have like a card with their scan code, so they just scan their card?
Yes, so that's,
Carry that to lunch?
yeah, step 1 is that every student has to have a card. I think we're able to print those out internally, and I think the teachers I think they're on lanyards possibly, and the teachers hold on to them, and the students that are gonna go through the line and pick up a meal get their scanner. Kathleen has said that there are some difficulties. It's the kind of thing where you have to aim it just right to get it to hit the barcode. So again, it's not an efficiency change, it's a touchless change. Yeah.
And when students are coming for breakfast, are they just showing up early before school to go through the line? Is that how that works?
It actually varies by campus. Some, I think a couple of our elementaries, or maybe one, are doing it before school. Most of them do it during the day. So at the first break, students can go to the cafeteria and get a meal.
Okay, so like the first recess, they just run in, grab it, and have their 15 minutes to eat.
Yes. And we have found, Kathleen has found that by offering that breakfast, once school has started, there's much greater participation. Like the campuses where we do it in the morning, it's maybe a dozen students. Whereas if we do it during the day, you'll get dozens and dozens of students coming in. So it goes up significantly, the participation rate. The downside of that is that it is later in the day. And so that may be hard for some students. And also, quite frankly, it's an economic decision, because in terms of the hours that we have staff on campus, have them come in before school, would just incur a greater cost. And at this point, we're trying to minimize those costs. Yeah, so it's a trade-off there. But most of it's during the day. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've read that there's other districts who've had to go to Sam's Club during the day just to pick up more food because of the shortages. We haven't had to do that at all, but we could if we needed to.
Now we can, exactly. Okay. So if we need to get those Uncrustables, we can do that.
Thank you.
And while you're there, you can pick up a COVID test, Sam's. You have districts buying them there too. I mean, just because of the demand, yeah, the supply and demand. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Next, we'll have Human Resource Services, Dr. Harishu.
Great, thank you. So I'll be reporting on health services, special education, and HR. So health services, on behalf of District Nurse Manager Erica Newkirk, in keeping with the most recent guidance from the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, Health Services has begun offering an option for modified quarantine for students exposed to COVID-19 in a school-based setting. This new option allows students to continue to attend school as long as certain conditions are met. The decision to authorize this option is based on the relatively low rates of transmission on school campuses due to our successful mitigation strategies. And we are excited to be able to offer this as an option, as it will allow us to keep more students in school safely and should cause less disruption to learning. Health Services is excited to announce the upcoming launch of the Health Services Helpline. The helpline is designed to take some of the work of COVID-19 clearances away from the attendants and the health offices. When a family or student reports an absence due to one or more symptoms of COVID-19 or due to a possible off-campus exposure, to a case of COVID-19. School staff will be able to refer families to the helpline to determine follow-up plans, answer questions, and collect any documentation that is required for students to return. And then the helpline staff can then provide a handoff to school site staff to let them know of the plan to return. And very happy to report that we were able to hire our own staff to be able to help us with this, additional LVNs using one-time monies. So. Next, in health services, in order to assist with new and emerging COVID-19 testing guidance, health assistants will be offering limited on-site testing for athletics testing, staff testing, including state-mandated staff testing, exposure-based testing, and testing for modified quarantine. This limited on-site testing exists in addition to the AEC testing. We wanted to extend our gratitude to Greg Gazanian, Jaime Morales, and Gabriel Santos and his team for all of their work on this project. And last, we will be having a flu vaccine clinic, which is going to be held on October 27th. So we've been able to get the word out on that. And that'll be held from 1 to 5. And that's for employees, dependents, and retirees as well. Moving on to special education, on behalf of Dr. Catherine Mahoney, we continue to receive accolades for the leadership of our educational services team in the significant disproportionality process from the CDE, our technical advisors, and our SELPA. Although this federally mandated process identifies general education as the lead, it is exceptionally rare for the process not to be led by special education, or even only involving special education. Our education services department leadership has been exceptional and will ultimately reflect in positive outcome for all students. And then next, the department wants to thank David Vong, who has been an instrumental partner as we collaborate with our SELPA to understand and plan for new grants that will be available to support students with disabilities this school year. Moving on to HR. HR is undergoing a credentials audit right now. This is for last year, so we're playing catch-up right now. Both the state and the county are playing catch-up on credential audits. Our certificated analyst, HR analyst Stephanie Paz, has been leading this effort, and everything will be complete by the end of this month, and then we will await the findings for that audit. HR is converting 21 more instructional aid positions to 6-hour benefited positions, and this is in addition to the 14 positions that we've already converted, so we're making really great progress on that front. HR also continues to hire substitutes in efforts to replenish our subpools. Finally, the HR team is in the process of collecting the vaccine records of all staff as required by the California Department of Public Health, and we of course are verifying the full vaccination, and confirmation emails are being sent out to staff this week for those who are fully vaccinated. And that concludes my report.
Question? The vaccine requirements for volunteers, like parent volunteers and folks like that, is that going to go through the same system, or is it going to be by site level?
That is probably a great question as he's designing that. We'll have to get back to you on that, yes. But we will have a process in place. I just don't know whether it's going to be at the site level or through us, yes.
Got it. And so there's going to be on-site testing for those who opt for the modified quarantine, right? Is that what you had said earlier?
Yes, you got it.
That's correct.
Yep.
And that's going to make it a lot easier for those.
It will. That's the goal, is to make it as easy as we can for kids and staff.
Thank you.
Sure.
I was really glad to see that modified
Yes.
quarantine over the weekend when I read about it.
Yes, yeah.
It's great.
Looks like kids are taking advantage of that as well.
Yep.
I just wanted to say thanks for those circle back emails that say you're verified, because I know like last time we weren't even sure where that was going.
Sure.
And that happened today, so that was great.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that came up.
Yeah, it did. Yes.
Seeing that verification, how important that is, so that was
Absolutely.
great to see as well. Anything else? All right, we'll move on to education services. Dr. Forsey.
All right, thank you. As Alicia mentioned in the SIGDIS presentation, I'll be updating you on the MTSS leadership team. that was established to support the development and implementation of MTSS across all schools this past summer. The MTSS leadership team is comprised of district administrators, principals, classroom teachers, school psychologists, instructional coaches, and APCs. Every elementary school site is represented on the team, and its primary purpose is to continue to build capacity and consistency in this initiative. The group first met this summer and will continue to meet each month to look at research, collaborate, and provide insight into how to build a thoughtful MTSS system, make connections with our current initiatives, and how to communicate with and develop all of our staff. And so one of the main goals of our MTSS leadership team is to ensure that MTSS isn't just a standalone initiative, that there's coherence across all the things that we're doing. Maybe one of the easiest things and one of the greatest missteps is just to get a list of things and say, oh, we're going to do that. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we have a 360 of the organization, and there's buy-in, a lot of feedback, a lot of input to build what Arcadia's MTSS system will look like that is coherent with our other initiatives, that are coherent with our values. And so that is a kind of a core pillar of our system. That means it may take a little bit longer because it's not just a laundry list of do this actions, but we feel like we will get to a very sustainable and coherent model that will be here for quite a long time and will do really good things for kids. Andrea wanted to make sure another piece, not directly connected to the MTSS, but you'll hear a theme with some of the parent education from our CCSS Plan. Tomorrow we'll be hosting a virtual parent meeting for our TKK and first grade families from 6 to 7:30. We're fortunate to have staff members share strategies in supporting their students during these very important primary years. And if you'll remember, we hosted one 2 years ago about this time in the Performing Arts Center. And now we'll be doing that virtually, which for safety reasons, but also it's much more accessible for these parents. And then lastly, thank you, Scott, for loading this up. We wanted to show you some of the feedback we got from our professional development day this past Friday. Thank you, Kay, for mentioning that in your opening. And so we used Thought Exchange, which again is a powerful tool for us to begin to quantify our answers, our responses. So here's the question. What are some key things you and your colleagues are doing well to build trust and relationships throughout the district? And so the next slide, you'll see these are our highest rated thoughts. And so these are the thoughts that somebody in the organization put in, and then these thoughts receive the highest ratings. And so you'll see right up there on top is really a valuing of our 360 of the organization, valuing the role that people play. The job of like a validation of our swag groups, and I would say a validation of our ability to pivot during this time in our swag groups and being able to be very thoughtful about how we're doing that, especially during this time. And then lastly, I think this was one of my favorite ones, that we're being honest about our success, but we're also seeing and we're honest about the challenges that we face. And I think that is it's nice that thought was made and that so many people validated that we celebrate our success and we're honest about our challenges and take those head on. The next slide, the second question we asked is, what have been your biggest bright spots working with your students? Again, students are back. We wanted to give staff, hear from them, the celebration of that. And then these were the highest rated thoughts there. That's probably a lot of what we would hope to see, but again, just the validation that schools were built for students to be there. That's why we exist. And that is my update for tonight.
Thank you,
Thank you, Scott.
Any questions? All right, Ryan Ferrant, Chief Communications Officer.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As for the Public Information Office, we sent out Coronavirus Update 59 last week. talked about our new testing setup, which allows for people to test in person right here at the AEC in the courtyard, starting this week, which has been going well. Update 60 this week. We will let, as Dr. Van Ostall mentioned, people know about the LA County Department of Public Health's new COVID-19 dashboard for schools in LA County. And we already have a link to that under our dashboard currently, so you can access it easily from our website and webpage. We've also updated, we were just talking about the modified quarantine. We updated our quarantine and exposure management page with the new modified quarantine option and what that entails, so you can read about that there. Then we also posted the modified quarantine agreement letter so everyone can see that. And Amber and I are debuting a new video segment this week, AUSD Board Spotlight, with our, thanks to Scott and crew, with our video technology and streaming of the meetings. It's easier to kind of take pieces of the board meetings and kind of highlight those. So, for instance, we'll be debuting the first one from our last board meeting with our honoring our Teacher of the Year, Mrs. Pasqua. So, be a nice memorial video to have and put out there to share if people weren't able to see it or don't want to go through the whole board meeting. We'll just have that a nice singular video segment. And that is, and Amber did a really good job with, she's putting some really cool graphics at the beginning and utilizing all the photos we take in it, so it looks really good. That is my report.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions?
I love the snippet idea. It's great. I'm glad.
Thank you. All right, I do have, real quick, it's been mentioned a couple times, but Greg Gazanian couldn't be with us tonight, but just wanted, he wrote this quick update on Arcadia Unified COVID-19 testing program. Pleased to share that Arcadia Unified testing program has now distributed well over 4,000 test kits to staff and students. In addition to reaching this milestone, we are currently expanding the program in the following ways. We've expanded our partnerships to include multiple testing providers in order to provide testing at a lower ongoing cost per test. As of this past Monday, we have added an option for in-person testing for staff and students at the AEC COVID-19 Testing Center that's now on the side of the building outside in the courtyard. And in order to facilitate in-person testing, the test center has moved. Just skip myself. In addition, staff will now be able to complete the testing process at their work site without needing to drop off the test kit at the AEC. So just to be clear, folks can still pick up a test kit and take it home, or they can be tested here on site. And so either way, they return it back to the AEC to be processed, or again, do it on site. So really pleased to continue to expand our testing service, and we'll continue to monitor that and make sure that people find it convenient and easy to use. That's the goal. So that does it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Van Ostall. And that brings us to our consent items. We need a motion to approve consent items A through H, I believe.
I move approval of consent items A through H.
And we have a second?
Second.
Man, I'm going to go with Mr. Eng this time. All right, the motion was made by Mrs. Kinsler, seconded by Mr. Eng. All those in favor of approving consent items A through H, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion carries. And that brings us to our exciting study session.
Yes, our annual enrollment and staffing presentation. I just wanted to say a few words as Scott was coming up to prepare for the presentation. We were sharing, I think, some conversations earlier tonight with some of the board members and some staff that it wasn't that many years ago that the opening to this presentation was, well, it's going to look a whole lot like it did last year. And we'd go through it, and you could move the cohorts over on the blocks on the graphs. But frankly, there just wasn't a whole lot of difference year to year. And that could not be further from the truth as the times that we are in now. Not only TK over the last few years, the mandatory TK that came in and how that threw off a lot of our predictions. But now with COVID, we have a lot of students that across the state have left the state
A lot of students moved around during COVID for particular reasons of flexibility and just, looking for something that was a little more stable than public schools at the time. So there's just a lot of moving parts right now and a lot of variables. We know birth rates are going down continuously. We know folks moving into Arcadia tend to have older kids, so we're not getting kids as much from, TK through 12. And so there's just a lot of variables and some positive ones that we haven't seen the payoff yet, but we're hoping down the road with the construction in the city of some new condos, homes, and apartments. So keeping tabs on all of this is a whole team of people, and it's a year-round process. I think that's something a lot of people don't recognize, that this is a meeting every week from Scott and Kevin and a host of team members, and being able to monitor it and make those predictions, as Kevin's going to do his part with staffing, are intimately connected then to the budget. And because as we lock in staff, those staff are there for the year. So this work is critical to the district from a financial standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, making sure we have the right teachers for students, and then creating the right number of classrooms as our parents move in, that they have a spot for their kids. So a lot going on behind this presentation for our enrollment and staffing. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Scott.
Thank you. David's clearly heard too many of these presentations because he's got the whole thing down. He's got it. So most of us know that the school year started a little over a month ago, but is it really official before the enrollment and staffing presentation? I mean, I think this really is the official start. So as David said, 3 years ago, I was wishing that there would be something different, so it wasn't the same presentation. So you have to be careful what you wish for, because we got a lot different, and it is nice to be back and doing this in person as opposed to last year's, which was virtual, and it's a little easier to stand here and talk about it and talk about some of the reasons. This is very much in the news right now. If you listen to the news today, there was lots of reports about LA Unified being down 6% this year. And one of the things that we know from looking at data is that we're not alone in this. Everybody is facing this, but we also know that we're facing it to a lesser degree than the average of the districts in the county, almost half of that average. So while it's really easy to fall into the trap that this is horrible, this is bad. It's not bad, it's not horrible, it's kind of the news. This is where we're at right now, and we just have to monitor it, plan for it, and read it as carefully as we can and try to figure out where it's going. And so probably more so than any year that I've done this presentation, I probably have less answers and more questions than ever before. But that probably means you will have more questions than ever before as well. So at any point you want to jump in and ask a question, I'll try to take a breath once in a while and let you get those in, or after any piece of this, feel free. I'll do my best to answer those questions, or promise that we'll continue to monitor it and let you know when we know, because a lot of this is kind of new to us and hard to tell where we're at. As David shared, this is not a process that is something TIS does by themselves. It's not a process that any of us do by ourselves, but it is a process of TIS, human resources, business services, ed services. We all work together on this, and it's really kind of strange because we all kind of have a little different interest in the whole process. From Kevin's perspective, obviously staffing. From Dirk's perspective, the budget. From the education side of things, there's lots of different perspectives, right down to scheduling. Scheduling is a big piece of enrollment projections, and knowing how many students are going to be at a school. And while it is scientific, it also is knowing and learning these things over time. And having done this for a long time, I'd like to have more answers than I do, but we'll start through the process here. So what we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to do a brief overview of the projection models that we use to come up with our enrollment projections and how they have how COVID has changed how we look at those and approach those. We're going to talk about what the goals of those projection models are. We're going to talk a little bit about the process and cycle, and we've already alluded to the fact that this is a year-round process. It has a very fuzzy start and finish, and we're kind of at the finish, and tomorrow kind of starts it all off again. And then we're going to do some analysis of the projections and see where we did well and see where we struggled, and see what we're thinking about in terms of what it's going to look like next year. And then I'll turn it over to Kevin to talk about the certificated staffing. Okay. All right, so the models for projections, for those of you who have been through this, it hasn't changed. We still use 3 different models. The primary one is our resident-based projections, but we use 2 cohort models, the cohort and incremental sums models, to kind of verify and make sure that the resident-based numbers seem to be correct. The cohort models, as you're going to see tonight, use weighted averages from previous years, and the previous year really kind of blew the cohort models, and you're going to see that the cohort models were very far off for last year's projections. They're always less accurate for school projections. They're pretty good for our district projections, but they're never as accurate in terms of how many students at each grade level are going to be at each school. And that's one of the reasons in 2001 we moved towards the resident-based model, which uses much more scientific data, such as live birth data, to project our TK and our K students, geographic data and grid codes within the city of Arcadia to project where kids are going to be located. And so they're far more accurate for those school projections. And then we also use those to create mobility factors, which help us determine how many kids we're going to have each year as students migrate in and out of Arcadia. And we're going to talk more about that migration in and out of Arcadia tonight than we probably ever have in this presentation, because it's the biggest factor in what we're seeing with our numbers currently. So the goals that we have for our projections are to be under 2% difference between the projections and the actual enrollment. That's district-wide, so under 2% district-wide. And you're going to see with one of the models we were within that, and one we were not. That certainly is more challenging in this time than it has been in the past, and you'll see that in the years that we display. We want to be within 20 students of actual enrollment at each of our schools. We actually were much better at this year than we were last year. This was a mess. We were not even close in our total at our schools last year. So it was a bit of a relief this year that we got much closer to this number. And then each grade level at each site projected within a single digit of actual enrollment. Again, we were better than we were last year. You're going to see a couple specific grade levels where we didn't do too well. And that's one of the areas I have questions, because I'm not really positive. One of them makes sense and one of them doesn't. And I just mentioned that the projections were completed during the closures last year. So we started this process basically October 1st last year, and has run this whole course up through the opening of school. All the numbers you're going to see are from basically the end of the first month of school. And the thing that I always remind you to keep in mind is that our projections include only our regular ed and our RSP students. Other special ed and much of our population at Rancho Learning Center are not included in these, and a big part of that is because we use resident-based projections, and the students aren't necessarily located where they're going to school, and so wouldn't project well to do that. And then this year we have the challenge that we have almost 200 students from our schools in independent study at Rancho Learning Center. So for the purposes of all of the things you're going to be looking at tonight, I have put those students back in their home schools because they were projected in their home schools. If I leave them out, then our projections are way off. And again, when we go to project them for next year, they're going to be back in their home schools when we project them. So that's why we put them back for the purposes of this presentation. So the screen that you're looking at currently is a portion of of one of the major pieces of our process for enrollment and staffing. This sheet is updated every day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I am really pleased to tell you that for the first time standing here, that this sheet now updates automatically. Nobody's running a query in PowerSchool or Sassy XP or any student information system and manually recording these numbers. I always share that when I started doing this, every day I ran a query and entered every single one of those numbers in the actual column every day, printed out 2 pages, and took it to the CBO, to director of HR, to superintendent, to assistant superintendents. I just walked down the hall and distributed them, and by the end of the year, everybody had a pile of paper about this tall. Google changed that completely when we were able to share it in Google Drive, and now we've been able to completely automate it so nobody has to go through that process. So that has been an enormous time saver. The only downside of that is it's really easy to forget to look at this data now. When we were doing it the other way, it kind of forced you to look at that. It certainly forced me because I was manually updating the sheet. So what you have here is each of our schools, obviously, with the actual number of students in each grade level, and then the projected number of students in each grade level. With the difference column. And then the other column is those other special ed programs that are not included in the projections, but we add them back in on this sheet for the total column. So the total column does reflect the total number of students at each site. Now, if you talk to a principal today and you said that was their number, they'd probably go, no, it's not. But that's because we've put those students from independent study back into those totals. As I said, one of our goals is to be within 20 students at each school site, and with the exception of, I think, 2, 3 if you count the high school, we didn't quite get there, but we're very close. So given all of the uncertainty, I'm pretty happy with that within 20 at each school site. We also want to be in single digits for each grade level. You'll notice that K at 3 of our elementary schools, we weren't within that number and we're quite far off. And we had some real issues in 4th grade this year, and you're going to see a better chart to see that here in just a minute. And 4th grade's got me stumped. Kindergarten's been a hard thing to project for quite some time, and when I get to those projections, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Our middle schools, you're going to see, are the smallest enrollment at our middle schools in a very long time. And the high school we came pretty close on this year, though we're over at 9th grade, which is interesting. So that is a piece of that process. We do this every day. Most of us look at this at least once a week during most times of the year, and then certain times of the year we're following it every single day throughout the process. So this is the analysis of our projections versus our actual enrollment, and unfortunately it's cut off on the bottom of my screen here. But we were less than 2% with our resident-based projections at minus 85 students. You can see that our incremental sums was really bad, minus 199 students. Our incremental sums are going to be, and our cohort method are going to be bad for a number of years because they do use weighted averages, and even if things bounce back to normal, those numbers are going to continue to be off for a few years at least because of the significance of the changes that we've faced over the last 2 years. Then we always take you to this next slide, which is kind of an analysis considering permits. And I'm going to turn it back over to David for just a minute. He wants to talk a little bit about permits, and then I'll kind of talk about the data involved in the permits.
Yeah, thank you. I get a lot of questions, and I know board members probably do too. So, a couple assumptions that I think is worth sharing. The first one is that when we talk about students on permit and looking at the number of new permits in a year, I think a lot of people have an assumption that those are all brand new students to the district that we haven't seen before. And that's just not true because a lot of students, at times, families move out of Arcadia into surrounding neighborhoods, different communities, and will apply for a waiver from their district that they just moved to so that their students can finish in Arcadia schools. So in essence, they are moving out, could go to another district. So, but the difference is that they've already been student of ours, and we've invested in those students. So that's one assumption. Another one is that that there's just this endless kind of pool, a spigot you turn on, and we could just fix our declining enrollment problem or challenge with permit students, and that's just not true. We cannot use permit students to fix our declining enrollment. Certainly, we have the ability as we attract students to attract more than most school districts do. And we do. But we're also very conscious of space and where we have space and room in our district, and specifically in grade levels. We have to be very conscious of not causing an impact to any one grade level. An example would be 7th grade this year across the district is impacted. So, that's where we've had to decline permits in that area. So I just wanted to share those two, that this is something that we've had as a tool to be able to accept students on a yearly basis, and that benefits all our students when we're able to kind of maintain some kind of stability of population, because that equals staffing and that equals programs, right? So as that declines, if we didn't have that ability, there would be a big jump year to year, depending on the class and the cohort. So we do use it to our advantage, but sometimes there's a misunderstanding that it could fix all of our problems. Thanks, Scott. I just wanted to
It's
share.
a great segue, using it to our advantage, because when you subtract the new permits out of our projections, we were further off than we generally are after those permits. But I do appreciate, David, that you shared that, because that's more information than we've shared on both positives and negatives probably associated with permits and releases than we have over the years during this presentation. And it's, to be honest, it's something that I wasn't aware of prior to this year. In a conversation with Jim Anderson, I learned some of that, and I went, wow, why am I learning this now? But it's just, one of those things where you continue to learn and you continue to get more of this information as you move through. We do release about 121 students to other districts, and as David said, generally for the same reasons that the new permits want to come back are often some of those reasons for people wanting releases. So they started school somewhere else, they moved to Arcadia. None of us can understand why anybody would want to opt out of Arcadia to go back to those places, but some people do, and so that's where some of those releases go. So, so this is kind of the analysis excluding permits. Now here's where a lot of my questions start to arise, and I think many of your questions will start to come up as well. And I do want to point out that the line where the yellow box is had bad information in the report that was sent out to you prior to this, and I've fixed that. I believe that yellow box said 60% growth from K to 12, and that was not the case. But what I really want to start out with on this slide is the blue boxes are the 12th grade cohort in the graduating class of 2022. And it's important to point out that they started as a kindergarten class in 09-10 of 433 students. This is the most unique thing about Arcadia's enrollment. This is something that you do not see in any districts surrounding us. In the San Gabriel Valley, this is completely uncommon. Most places, their K numbers are very high, and they decline over the years as they go through. The demographer that we use to do our data took 5 years to acknowledge that this could actually be our pattern. And so it really is very, very unique that a class nearly doubles in size. As a matter of fact, for many, many years, it more than doubled in size. Just over the last 5 or 6 years, that's changed. And part of that is the start of TK, and then for us, the start of full day TK and K, we started getting some of those students earlier. So you'll notice we have some very large kindergarten classes from 16, 17 on, compared to all of these other classes over time. And part of that's because we started capturing those kindergartners much earlier than we had in the past. I will say that large K classes are usually an indicator of growth in Arcadia, and I was very excited for several years because we were getting these larger K classes. Unfortunately, some of that has been stifled by what you're going to see on the next few slides, but up until that point, I was very confident that we were going to begin to see growth over the next 6 to 10 years because of the size of those classes. We'll see how that shakes out and how things bounce back after this year. You will notice, actually I'll go to the next slide, I think, because it will show that better. Have I said everything I wanted to say on this slide? I think so. Except then I was going to go to that. So let me go back real quick here. As I shared before, our middle schools are the smallest they've been since, I believe, 92, 93. Is that right? Maybe even further back. No, it might have been 91, 92, I guess it was. Our middle schools are the smallest they've been. So given that data, unless something significant changes, that means that over the next 3 years, the high school's going to shrink. The high school's going to be smaller over the next 3 years than it has in a while. So we're seeing this bubble go through, and then when you take away the growth from the last 2 years that we may have seen, it does indicate that the high school will be down in enrollment over the next few years. That was the other thing I wanted to point out. I don't know if any of you noticed, but our graduating class of 725 seniors is also the smallest graduating class we've had since 96, 97, I believe. So it is a little bit smaller class. And you'll notice we had a graduating class of 777, I think, last year. So we have almost 50 less seniors this year than we did just a year ago. So, and some of that is just bubbles that move through. We'll have a small class, and that is smaller coming all the way through. And you'll kind of see that as we move on too. So what is this all about? All of our enrollment projections are kind of based on the migration of students into Arcadia and out of Arcadia. And for as long as I've been doing this, the number of students migrating into Arcadia far exceeds the number of students migrating out of Arcadia, although it is kind of interesting to see how significant the number of students migrating out of Arcadia has been over the years. It's always over 600 students, which means we always have well over 600 migrating in as well. But this year it kind of flattened out. We have almost as many migrating out as migrating in. So the decline we're seeing is a combination of a higher migration out and a lower migration in. It's not just losing students. It's just a combination of both. I did list the most common exit reasons that are tracked at this point in time: in-state transfer, out-of-state transfer, out-of-country transfer, private school transfer. They're all exactly what they sound like. In-state transfer means students that transfer to another California public school district. Out-of-state transfer, people moving out of state; out of country, people moving out of country; and private school, people moving from public to private schools. Now, I couldn't really draw any conclusions from the data that we currently have because all that's collected through CalPADS, the state reporting system, and it's all part of the fall submission. And so we only have that data recorded currently on about half of the 900 students who have left the district. The other half just say end of year transfer is all they say. So we don't have all that information. Between our school offices and CalPADS data, over the next few months, that data will fill in and we'll have more information on that. CalPADS fall submission is done, I believe, at the end of December. So it could be as long as the end of December before we really have all that information. My gut from watching this over time tells me that most of those numbers will be fairly consistent with the numbers we've seen, just higher. I think that we may see a little higher numbers in out-of-state transfers just based on the news of the number of people leaving California. We are always a bit unique in the out-of-country transfers. We have more out-of-country transfers than a lot of districts do. And I also believe that, as David said, our private school number is probably going to be higher this year just based on the uncertainty around the opening of schools all summer long. I think some people just made that decision knowing that the private schools would open. Private school enrollment is up. Last year in March, they reported, I believe, private school enrollment was up over 20,000 students in Los Angeles County. And so we know that number's probably going to be a little higher than it traditionally has been. So I think all those numbers will probably be somewhat higher. I don't know if any one of them will be like a big factor in it, but we will certainly track that and share that when we have that information. Okay. All right. This chart obviously is just our total enrollment K-12 from 1988 to 2022, and you can really see the steep decline in the two COVID years. Our decline was certainly consistent prior to that, but it certainly wasn't as drastic as we're currently seeing, and that's going to be really shown on a couple of charts here in just a moment. But you can kind of see we're starting to pass some of those mid-90s years that were just such consistent growth for the district. This one here really shows the drop-off in middle school. So the red line is the middle school, and you can just see. So the reason for this, really, even more so than the COVID situation, was that a very large 8th grade class left the middle schools and went to the high school last year, and a very small 5th grade class left the elementary schools and came into the middle schools. So it actually makes a lot of sense why the middle schools are as small as they are. And we've been watching that bubble move through the elementary schools, and now it's finally hit the middle schools, and now we're going to watch it hit the high school as well. So we're going to see that, but at least as we monitor this, we know that's coming.
Was the green line the high school?
The green is the high school, and the blue is the elementaries. And up until the last 2 years, I was really excited because we were starting to see that elementary line move up, and knowing that our classes grow consistently from K through 12, that was very exciting because watching that come through was going to see us increase in elementary and increase in middle and increase in high. And I think, possibly our overall enrollment moving upward for a change for at least, not a huge amount, but at least move upward for a period of time. Now with this, we'll have to see where that takes us. These next two slides have always been my favorite two slides in the presentation because they're easy to look at the consistency with which our classes have grown. And there is a new dynamic to these slides this year, and that is the red boxes. We've never had the red boxes before, and part of that is, if you look, I believe there's 16 years of data on this, and prior to 2021, there had never been a negative number in K-8. There had consistently been some in 11 and 12, but there had never been any negative numbers in K-8. And then you look and we have, seven different grade levels over 2 years that the number is negative. The one that really stands out to me is 4th grade in 21-22. I don't know what we did to drive 4th graders out of Arcadia in 21-22, but I really believe it's coincidence, but it's kind of an astounding coincidence. And it's going to be interesting to see how, and for anybody who doesn't know, the way this works is you go diagonally down the chart. So in the 12th grade cohort, you can see that from kindergarten to 1st grade, the 12th grade cohort grew 20%. From 5th grade to 6th grade, the 12th grade cohort grew 6%. And then the next chart, instead of being percentages, is going to be the actual number of students that it grew. And that's where you see the 4th grade minus 35 for 21-22. So, you know, we're going to be watching all of that very closely and talking to the demographer about what they think this means. I will tell you that if we had gone with the straight numbers from the demographer for our projections this year, we would have been very, very far off. We made changes to make those numbers more conservative, and we came fairly close in most instances. But just because we knew with all the uncertainty that we probably weren't going to see the growth that we've seen in the past during this year. But when I changed those boxes to red, it kind of jumped out at me, the significance of what we're going through right now.
But Scott, when the CalPads gets all straightened out,
yes,
we will know to some certainty where those 35 students.
Yeah, we should be able to look and see what happened there. Certainly, yeah, absolutely.
Do we think that 35 was evenly distributed throughout the 6 elementary schools, or was it?
That's information I could probably look at now. I have not looked at that, but you know, keep in mind that doesn't necessarily mean that 35 students left. That means that it could mean that 16 students left and we didn't grow by what would that be, 19? Like we usually would have, because we usually see significant growth from 3rd to 4th grade. So, Brian, can you put me back in present mode, because I just took myself out? Thank you. So if I go back here, you'll see 3rd and 4th grade, up until the last couple of years, you know, often grew by 4%. I'm sorry, that's 3rd grade. Almost always grew by 4 to 5%. And going back, the current senior class grew by 7% from 3rd to 4th grade. So we went from 5% growth in that grade level in 1920 to -2 and -6 in 2021. So it may be that that's a grade level that a lot of people move into Arcadia, and this year and last year a lot of people didn't move into Arcadia. And I think, you know, uncertainty over COVID, people not wanting to spend that money to move into Arcadia, whatever the case may be, that just may be a place that caught a lot of that. So don't get hung up on thinking that we lost 35 kids in 4th grade. It really doesn't mean that. It just means that the combination of what we lost and what we gained wound up equaling -35. And then finally, this chart shows just a bar graph of the cohort of 2022, starting at that 433 and ending at 725. You can see very consistent growth through 9th grade, and then slight drop-off. That's not uncommon over the last few years, as shown by the red boxes across the bottom of those other graphs. And that is really the end of the enrollment part of this, unless you have questions. A lot of information. A lot of information late at night.
Those are not good numbers.
Do you have any, in terms of the releases and new permits over year, do you have a sense of whether that's going up or down?
You know, that number actually has been pretty consistent for the last several years. And honestly, the permit number coming in has been pretty consistent coming in. And so I don't think there's been much of a rise. I can pull that data and we can look at it, but my gut from having done this for so many years, I believe pretty strongly that number is pretty consistent and did not rise, I don't believe, the last 2 years.
As a parent of a 4th grader, I can just anecdotally can validate that there have been kids moving out, like out of state and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know why 4th grade. Maybe it's just because it's young enough for families to move and not have a huge impact. Maybe that's part of it, and pandemic was the catalyst. get that going, but yeah, I have noticed that.
I do think that, that there are things that we don't totally understand in the data that do make sense out of some of that, and I think that probably, you know, what we talked about is probably part of the reason that we've seen that decline in fourth grade. But just an example of what I mean by that is forever we saw this huge 20% increase between K and first grade. And we always speculated on what that might be and why that might be. But the year we went to full day kindergarten, that dropped from 20% to 8%, and it's been consistently lower since. So we learned for sure that full day K was the reason for that huge increase. And the minute we had full day K, and then same with TK. When TK went full day, the number of TK kids we began capturing went up by like 20%, just because we went to full day TK. So a lot of these things have really big impacts, and sometimes we don't really know what they are until we make the change.
Interesting to see the expansion of TK and how that's going to affect enrollment too.
And it's gonna make projecting TK and K even more of a nightmare. And one of the things, you know, right in the middle of all the TKK stuff, the birth rate in Arcadia went through the roof, almost doubled in almost over a year or 2 years, and it's attributed to maternity tourism. And so figuring out what our capture rate of the births in 91006 and 91007 is very challenging, because we don't know how many of those kids are out there for us to capture. And so all these things happening at one time have made projecting TK and K just really challenging. So, all right. I'm going to take the controller to Kevin and let him continue on.
All right. I feel like I need to do a song and dance to keep everybody awake. But
Or cheer us up.
that's right. Well, I'll start off by saying that this year was probably the most complex year from a staffing perspective, and there were a lot of sleepless nights leading up to the opening of school, or into summer and whatnot, that we were going to get this right. And there were two kind of big decisions that were made by the executive team that really, I think, started to stabilize things, at least from my own process and whatnot. The first one was in relation to our projections, and obviously we've lost about 300 kids from last year to this year, which could have had a significant impact to staffing, right, and cuts. And we decided as an executive team that we were going to try to keep staffing as stable as possible. We would make some cuts, but we wouldn't cut to the level that we could have just based on our regular staffing formulas. So that decision was really helpful. The second one that became, that was really unpredictable at the start was, how was independent study going to work? Were we going to have to shift staff from a school site if suddenly we saw a flood leave a school site and move it to independent study? So once we made that decision that we were going to hire separate staff for the independent study and keep our school sites intact regardless of that impact, that really helped us, at least from a stability perspective of knowing who was going to be where and whatnot. So with that said, we started hiring early. Last year we started hiring in March. I think the high school started hiring that early, and which is always great because you want to get out in front of the competition. And as you saw in our New Educator Academy, we hired some rock stars, and that we're very proud of. This slide just shows you just very big shot, 30,000 foot perspective of what we're looking at. This is teacher FTE. So you'll see from last year to this year, we have only lost 1.79 teachers. I want to remind you, we've lost 300 students, right? So we are using a lot of those one-time dollars for teachers, and we did that very intentionally. We wanted to make sure that the classroom was not, that we weren't going to just overload classrooms just because we could to save a buck. We know that this was a really important time as kids were transitioning back into school, that where we could help out and keep class sizes lower, we wanted to be very intentional and strategic about that. So this just gives you kind of a breakdown in relation to the different levels that we have. A couple of things that I just want to point out We only declined by one elementary teacher district-wide, even though we declined by 80 students. At the middle school level, we declined by 5.31 teachers, and they saw a loss of 218 students. And of course, at the high school, they remained flat, and they actually increased. But part of that increase is because they started their independent study at the high school, right? So they were running their own program there. Of course, we added 2 Rancho teachers, independent study, and we are in the process of adding a special ed TOSA right now as well. So, moving on to APSA. You will see that those numbers remain pretty stable too. We have a loss of 0.9, but that's actually not a loss of services to kids. You might recall that we converted Erica's position as a nurse to a nurse manager. That position was taken from APSA, but it didn't decrease any services to kids, right? Just a change in title and position. And then, of course, we added a 0.1 position to a speech and language. And we did that because it was a 0.9 position, and our applicants wanted a full-time job, and we were losing applicants over that 0.9 as they were being offered jobs in other districts. Speech and language is a highly competitive classification, so we upped that to the 0.1 so that we could secure somebody and not lose somebody over that. All right, moving on. Here's just a breakdown of counselors, psychologists, speech and language, program specialist. We have our half-time nurse that remains in the APSA unit. All right, moving on to certificated administration. You will see that our current number from the certificated is 29. That is 1 increase from last year, and that is Erica Newkirk's position. Hers is, she has to have a credential for her position, so she's certificated. And as you know, this summer, as you all knew from all the receptions that you went to this summer, it was quite a hiring season for us administratively. Just as a reminder, we had the director of CINA, we had Hugo Reed principal, Longley Way principal, Dana principal, and AHS assistant principal. So it was a summer like none other in the 10 years that I've been here, but exciting and great. All right, certificated administrators just gives you a breakdown of where that lands, executive cabinet, directors, principals, assistant principals, etc. You may recall that we also converted the dean position to an assistant principal position. This is a slide that we like to show every year just to kind of toot our own horn a little bit. This is from EdData website, and the most recent data is from 1819, so it is a bit dated. But currently, what this graph shows you is certificated administrators to student ratio. And AUSD is 36 or 365.5 to 1. And countywide, the average for that year was 225 to 1. And this again demonstrates that Arcadia is incredibly lean in its district administration. So we're very, very proud of that. We do amazing things with smaller staff. Just to give you a breakdown of some of the new hires. I know that many of you were able to attend the New Educator Academy. We hired 13 elementary, 2 middle, 10 high school, 2 at Rancho, 1 is adaptive PE, 4 APSA, and 3 new administrators for a total of 35. So it was a busy hiring season. And these new employees just are, this chart is showing you people, not FTE, just to be clear on that. And this does not include all the transfers and reassignments that were facilitated at the site level, and it doesn't include the rehiring of the dozens of temp teachers and counselors that we have as well. So HR was a very busy place. And I just would be remiss if I didn't recognize the hard work of my team, Carol, Marie, Terry, Daisy, and Stephanie. They worked their tails off this summer, and I just could not have done this without them. And really, too, what I like to highlight in relation to our new hires is The mission for HR isn't just to fill positions, but it's to find the right person for each position, and we take that very seriously here in Arcadia. And this is a new slide this year. I know we shared this before with the board, but just show how we're making some great progress in relation to our diversity. And we've also included in the past through the FBL some historical data on that, so we're making really fantastic progress there. But this just gives you a breakdown of our new hires, the certificated new hires district-wide, something that we're very proud of. This just shows that it's very much in alignment with our trend in attracting and hiring diverse candidates. And you also might recall that ethnicity data was also shared in 2 of our recent audits. One was our federal audit and one was our induction audit. And they had really great things to say about our progress in that regard. So again, something we're very proud of. And with that, that concludes my piece of the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What does TOSA and APSA stand for?
Oh, great. Okay. So TOSA stands for Teacher on Special Assignment. So those are some of our instructional coaches. Those would be teachers that don't have a class and they work with other teachers and whatnot. And APSA is Arcadia Pupil
Support services, yeah.
Thank you. Let's all sing it together. My professional national organization is ASPA, and I get those so confused. So anyway, thank you for the help. It takes a village.
It's like counselors.
Yeah, so those are the group that represents counselors, speech and language, psychologists, nurses, so a different group than our teachers.
Okay,
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. I used to be the one that always asked those questions. It's like somebody else is doing it.
All right, that's the end of my song and dance.
I feel like you've been singing and dancing for months with
Yes.
all that hiring.
Yes.
All right, well, thanks for the presentation. Good and the bad, the
One
ugly.
question,
Yeah.
and this is more maybe a question for Derek, because it's a budget question. But, looking at roughly a 3% drop in enrollment is going to correspond to ADA. Do we have a ballpark of what that means in terms of LCF funding, local control funding formula, funding for us?
So the budget part of all these numbers come in and where we project enrollment. Enrollment leads to attendance, which is how we're funded. And so David Vong and I have years and years of data where we see the relationship between projected enrollment, our CBEDS enrollment, which is that first Wednesday in October, and then our first and second attendance periods, and we're funded on our second attendance period mostly. And so we've talked about the cliff, the fiscal cliff that's coming because of, we've had a couple years of hold harmless in our attendance, and next year will be the first year that at this point will no longer continue. We're funded on the greater of the prior or the current year. So our ADA this year, assuming it's higher than next year's, if we continue to decline, our ADA this year will be how we're funded next year. So you may recall, I'm guessing, I mean, I don't recall myself, but when David Vong presented the budget in June, he talked about the consequences of our projections and what that meant for our LCFF next year. It was a $2 million drop, approximately. He and I were just talking about this recently, and using our current, because our current enrollment is now below projections also by about 100. That's about another $1 million. So we're looking at a $3 million, I mean, very rough, very round numbers, a $3 million decline in LCFF next year from this year.
Will Well, the fact that we're using one-time monies to hold our staffing steady then also impact us in addition to that, lower funding, and, I mean, it's a tough question. But our attendance does correlate to the staff that we need. And if we've made that decision, which I fully support and think was the right one, as kids are coming back into our campuses, I think some would look in and say that we're overstaffed because we did that, and it was the right choice to keep our kids safe and learning. But how is that gonna hit us for next year?
Well, and one strategy, if you don't mind me chiming in here, dear, we always talk about a soft landing with anything, right? We do have reserves, we have one-time dollars. We are confident that we can manage this in a soft landing versus a slash and burn mode, as you see in other districts. So just generally speaking, that's our frame as we move forward, so.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We have reserves to manage this. The key is that we are actively, consciously making those decisions to utilize those reserves for this purpose. And this year, we did that. We, in particular at the middle school level, we made the decision to retain FTEs, provide a soft landing for those schools with enrollment declining. Now, enrollment declined more than we thought it would, and that puts us right back in that same situation for next year. But again, we have the reserves to make careful decisions. And I'll just say that when I talk to other CBOs and other districts that are struggling financially, and I say, how did you get there? How did you guys get there? How did that district get there? Almost without fail, the answer is we were declining in enrollment and we never looked at our staffing and aligned our staffing. So declining enrollment in and of itself isn't necessarily a problem as long as expenditures follow the reduction in revenue. And of course, we know 85% of expenditures are people. So there has to be that relationship and that continuous reviewing of those staffing levels. And from my experience, we do an amazing job here of looking at that as a team and making those decisions.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, and I think we are comments of our board members. So Kay, our inspiration, you get to go first.
Thank you so much for the reports, both the CCSS.
You got it?
That one.
And the enrollment staffing. I know how much goes into those. You can see it in the detail that you have. But that is so essential for running our district and making sure we're helping our kids to be the best, to learn everything they need to, as well as keeping us financially solvent. So that's really great. I wanted to just thank a couple parents who, we pass all the consent agenda all the time, but often nobody even knows what's in that consent agenda. And tonight we appointed 2 representatives to the San Gabriel Valley Special Ed and Local Plan Area, our SELPA, Advisory Committee, and that's Carl Chang and Sandy Chiang. And thank you to both of you for serving on that. Give our kids the best special ed program available and to keep parent communication to those programs. So thank you. And it was really obvious how busy you've been with all the things in the personnel report, PAR. Because all the instructional assistants, the increased hours, as well as hiring all the subs that were listed in there. So thank you, and I know, Catherine, you're busy with that too, so it's a lot. I attended the music club meeting this week, and of course, I've put my notes in a safe spot and can't find them. but everything is going great with them. They do have the parents involved. Band is ramping up. And they had a walkathon recently. A couple of the groups are getting or doing different types of uniforms this year, and that would be like choral and the orchestra. So they'll have a choice of a black dress or black shirt and pants and tie type thing, so that they're uniform, but that gives them, the kids, choice what they want to wear. And I'm trying to think what else was there, but I thank all the parents that are involved with not only music club, but all of our organizations, because boy, do they make a difference in what we're able to offer our kids. And I think that's all I have on my notes.
Mr. Chang?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, lots of great substantive reports. The doctor squad, awesome. You could be your own Grey's Anatomy, but a little bit different, I guess. And then on the enrollment report, thank you, Scott and Kevin and Derek, for that. My perspective, I really liked, Derek, when you said, declining enrollment is not necessarily a problem, right? We're going back to enrollment numbers of when I was here as a student. And I thought it was great. So I don't mind the lower numbers. Just have to really think about, being lean but mean, small but mighty. Bigger is not necessarily always better. So, as we go into this new normal, this new reality of declining enrollment, I know the district will be looking at how to really take advantage of these opportunities to get even better, always get better every single year. Thank you in advance to Shirley and Lee for spotting the Arcadia boosters, athletic boosters meetings I'm not going to be able to make this month and next month. So I appreciate that very much. And I think the last thing I want to mention is today is voter registration day. And I know everyone here is registered to vote, but for anyone who's watching and for seniors in high school, please register to vote. It's a very, very important part of civics in the United States. So I highly encourage it and get out there and register. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wu, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So first off, the architecture presentation got me really excited because really your physical surroundings does make a huge difference in your educational experience, particularly throughout my entire educational experience, what classroom you are, oh my, we get to go in that class today, or something students have strong opinions on, or chairs, what chairs you do and don't like. I remember when we had ASB come to our first meeting, what some of my ASB members told me, they're like, you got a really nice chair. I was like, I know. So there's that kind of thing. I am kind of jealous that I won't get to see, that I won't be in the district to see what changes are made, but I'm looking forward to what will be done in the future. And then when we were talking about the different food services and how breakfast went up, it made me think of when I was in Hugo Reed, go Raiders. I didn't need breakfast, but I remember I went specifically every time they had French toast sticks just because I was interested in that. So I'm sure that's going on at some of the elementary schools too, which is probably exciting because now, hey, if you want French toast sticks, you can go French toast sticks without having to worry. And with everything else that's going on today, it's really nice to see at every meeting really how diligently people are working on behalf of the students, just purely for our benefit. So that's really nice, and I think that wraps up my comments for today.
Thank you. All right, Marcy.
I echo everything that everyone says, and the thanks and all the reports. They're always so valuable, and like everyone said, you can tell there's a lot of work goes into it, so thank you. So as Raymond said, I did attend the Athletic Boosters this month, and it was a good meeting. They wanted to let you know they had a phenomenal summer camp session this summer, which was surprising, but it was great because summer camp raises money for the boosters. They had so many kids sign up, they actually had to, tell us, a lot of the kids, that there wasn't any room, so they're thinking next year that they may actually do kind of like different groups, so like have like an ABC for basketball so they could get more kids in. So that's kind of exciting for them. And then they did start their weekly COVID testing for unvaccinated athletes, and that's going really well. They do it in the office. And other than that, sports is doing really great. Football has been really fun. The games have been very exciting. Winning in the last few seconds of a game, the last one at LaSalle. And with homecoming coming up, I know the high school students are really excited. And it's been an unprecedented year for homecoming sales. I hear that they're almost all sold out at capacity at 1,000 students, which is amazing. So it just goes to show that our students are just really excited to finally have a fun event to go to and enjoy it with their friends. So I'm really excited for our high school students to be able to have their homecoming this year. Let's see, what else? I also attended the high school Chinese boosters meeting. And it was great to just hear what they were planning on doing, supporting the high school as always. They're planning their big Chinese New Year event. Hopefully that will still be in person, if that's what they're planning, so that'll be fun, and I know I'll enjoy that. Let's see. Oh, and the recent news tonight was that there are 5 of our high school students that are in the finalists for the Rose Court. So that's pretty exciting, and we'll see what happens. Maybe Arcadia will be represented again. So that ends my, oh, one more thing. I just wanted to say a big thanks to Erica Newkirk and her team. Just being a parent, I've had to talk to them a lot and get questions answered. I know they work 24/7, calling parents on the weekends and things like that. So I just wanted to say an extra thanks to her and her whole entire team for just continuing to be so vigilant and keeping our students and staff safe.
Once again, I want to thank Presentation for the comprehensive, coordinated early intervening services plan. Great work. Thank you. Appreciate that. Also, all the updates were very positive, and thank you for all those updates. Also, buried in the consent items is the school plan for student achievement. I'd like to thank principals and their staffs for all that hard work. A lot of information, valuable data that hopefully will help give us some guidance. So, appreciate that. That's all I have.
Let me echo the plans for student achievement. They are quite comprehensive, and it's always super interesting to look at the data and the goals based off of that. So thanks for all the work that goes into that. I really appreciated hearing about the MTSS leadership team and the direction that that's taking. Excited to see that developing in the district. And Ms. Rua, it was really nice to hear how the inclusivity push to include more kids at high school in the homecoming festivities. Thanks for putting that into the report, because that's new and it's exciting to see that as well. It was a lot of fun today. I went to Camino Grove and saw TK Kinder and First Kids in a SELPA class doing tostada building for Hispanic Heritage Month, and it was just really exciting and fun to be on a campus with little ones squishing cheese and lettuce. It was the best. Really made my day. Very excited to see the architect contract awarded, and thanks to Mr. Barrios for coming and helping to present that. Look forward to lots of good stuff from that department and the community being involved in those plans as they evolve. And lastly, thanks to the magic wand clicking scenario, that kind of thing. So Scott and Brian, thank you for the new tech, and also, of course, for all the reports. They were great, and I will let you finish it out.
All right, thank you, Madam President. I won't repeat all of the well-deserved accolades for our presentations tonight. Just want to recognize that as I sit here and listen to reports from architecture to academic plans with CSAs to enrollment, listening to our values play out in real time every day just warms my heart and just reminds me why I enjoy working in this district with such a world-class staff and board. So thank you, everyone, for a great night.
All right, great. So we are adjourned at 9:53. Thank you.
Did you have fun? We checked meals in 7 minutes.
Brent, you're looking very spiffy this evening.
I like that.
That's where
I was going for.
Exactly. For you.
and or you can update it.